Okay, welcome everyone once again to Immigrant Tech is Alberta. Thank you for coming here to spend your beautiful Tuesday evening with us. And just a brief overview of what this community is about. So this Immigrant Tech is Alberta was created to create a space of psychological safety for newcomers who are coming, who just got into Canada and are trying to explore the intimidating tech space. It seems the tech space comes across as intimidating to people because of some of the, the notions, the preconceived ideas that people have about tech and how to navigate it and what age group it belongs to, what demographic you usually find there. So this community was created to demystify tech, basically, and then be that space where people can ask all their questions, be that first stop for newcomers who are wondering, where do I go if I want to start a business? How do I connect with career professionals in this area? So it's like that bridge, being the bridge to the larger ecosystem, being that place of safety where people can express their concerns, where they can ask all their questions without feeling intimidated. And yeah, just providing space for community. That's what we do here. And so you didn't come here to listen to me speak, so so tonight we have Allie. Allie has been a very strong supporter of this community. So many times she's, shared a hint or a word or a tip, and she's really thrown her weight behind this vision. And I'm so happy to have her back. This is not the first time she has come here to share her wisdom, so she's here again today. Allie is the founder of ResumeFree, and she'll talk a lot more about herself. I'll just let her do that. Thank you, Allie. Welcome to the virtual floor.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate being able to come back again, and this is so important, and I truly am honored to be here because honestly, I even put in the posting, I couldn't imagine, taking my world as it is and my family as it is, and then moving into a new country with all of my skill set and then trying to establish myself as a professional coming into that space. So I wholly understand the difficulty that is ahead. I've not personally experienced it from a global perspective, but from a national perspective, I've been there, I've done it. So I wanted to give a few tips and tricks that I've been through myself as number one, a recruiter, and number two, as an employee, in making these harder situations easier. So the first things first, I am an immigrant grandchild. So my grandparents and my great grandparents came here as settlers, but they were given the opportunity, right? They were given land that wasn't theirs to establish themselves. So that doesn't exist anymore. We don't do that. But they had opportunity that was given to them beforehand, and they were told to steward the land, even though they weren't the original stewards. So from that perspective, I'm an immigrant grandchild, so I'm not even, in this space a long enough time. It's been less than 100 years that my family's been here. So I've learned from my grandparents and my great-grandparents and from my parents on how to do the world of work. And plus the 20+ years that I've had being a recruiter and in the recruiting space, I wanted to share that knowledge here. So I do have kind of a list, but I do better when I go ad hoc, and I do apologize for that. And just to kind of set the tone for the evening, you're going to have a bunch of questions, and that's what we're here for. I can see that there's some great opportunities for people in the crowd as well. So Nancy Wilson is actually one of the facilitators that works with me at River City, and she is amazing as well at upskilling and helping other people upskill into certain areas and finding those roles as well. So I've created this one little page that I was smooshing everything underneath at the bottom. So I want to go through a few of the things that you might not think about when it comes to doing your first real job search or your first career search in Alberta or in Canada. And then down the road, I want to be able to answer any of the questions that may come. So I will try and be as brief as possible, but giving you as much information. It's a good thing that this is recorded because number one, I do tend to talk fast when I am explaining something I love, so I do apologize. I will do my best to go slow. And number two, if there's anything that you've missed from the notes perspective, then I'm assuming this will be shared after Wumi, so we can get people to rehash what we talked about and go over it again. Cool. Okay, so I think the number one most important step when it comes to doing your job search or launching into your job search is actually doing like a self-check first. And I know this sounds a little bit weird, but when it comes to navigating a new career and going into the new spaces, you have to always take a look at what you're dealing with presently. So the first big thing to look at is the emotional aspect of it. So I think a lot of people forget is that when you are going into a job search, the number one thing that you're going to be needing is confidence. And if you keep applying and you don't get any word back, your confidence slowly drains down. So the self-awareness is, you know, are you in the right space, like headspace? Are you mentally and physically and, you know, spiritually ready to launch into a new career? Number one. Are you anticipating some of the needs that might come up that you didn't think about? So for instance, a job search, when you're starting from scratch, you need to treat it like it's a 40-hour work week. And you need to be doing 40 hours of research into each area that you want to get into. I'll talk about that kind of planning later on, but it is a time commitment. So do you have the time to make those decisions as you move forward? But I think the one thing that people forget about is the grief aspect of job search. So usually when you're looking for a new job, there's a period of grievance or grieving that you've been through with your previous roles. Like for example, if you're coming and you've got the full designation as an engineer in another country, you have to redesignate and get those hours again in Canada in order to be vetted. And so there's the grieving of, well, I've already done this. I have my professional background. Why can't they see it this way? And so Canada is getting better when it comes to some of the educational requirements and experience requirements, but we're not there yet. Case in point, there was two lovely individuals that were from Venezuela that were both medical doctors down in Venezuela, but they came to Canada and they had to go through medical training again because it was not considered Canadian appropriate, which is devastating because if you're treating people in one country, you should be able to treat people in another country. Anatomy doesn't change. There's no changes with that. So I think there's needs to be that grieving point of, you know what, I am who I am from the past, and I'm going to bring that into my career. So emotions, number one, and then for self-awareness, number two is, what do you need from the job? So when it comes to the job, obviously we work because we like money. We work because we have bills to pay. So from that perspective, we need to say, you know, what's the minimum negotiation that I want to go for? And I think when it comes to salary negotiations, and I know this is going to be a big question later on, salary negotiations, do not sell yourself short. There are many different examples and areas that you can take a look to see what the median salary range is for that role. And one of them I'll be able to put in the chat in a little bit here. Or Nancy, if you can find the alis.ab.ca one and put it in for the OCU info, thanks. So we tend to, when we're going into a new industry or a new career or anything like that, new sector, we'll always sell ourselves short because we just want to get our foot in the door. However, when we do that and we minimize our worth through salary, then we have a whole bunch more expectation that we need to recover and go from there. So what is a reasonable budget and a reasonable salary for you? And then there's other things to compensation as well, such as, you know, is there benefits? Do you need to have benefits for your family and yourself? Is there days off? What does the vacation policy look like? Is it a contractor position? Is it an employee position? So all of these things are places that you can go to write down, like, I need this rather than I want this. So the vacation policy that's, very robust and it has all of the major holidays off and all of that wonderful stuff. That's great. But what do you get in return? So are you being paid for those days off? Or are they unpaid days? So there's things that you need to factor into the total compensation piece and what you need from the business. Another thing we always forget about is the hours. So one of the interesting things about the world of work in Alberta is we tend to have different work arrangements. So there's the 40-hour work week, there's the 44-hour work week, and then there's the 37.5-hour work week. And so typically speaking, the 40-hour work week is considered by all norms one full-time equivalent work week. Up to 44 hours, people can work without overtime in Alberta. And there's a whole bunch of asterisks next to this. So if you do have any questions about that, I can answer them one off. They'll be different. But then there's also the 37.5, which is still considered a full-time equivalent. It's just on a shorter work week. So even if you have one person making $75,000 at 40 hours, if somebody's making $75,000 at 37.5, it's going to be a little bit different compensation per hour. And there's math behind that. So understand what your hours of work are going to be and what the expectations are. Do you need to be there 15 minutes before? Do you need to be right sliding in the door, right at 8 o'clock or 8:30, what have you? So what are you able to work around with your family situation, or if you have other obligations, school, anything like that, what's going to fit best? Most of the time, we'll let you know ahead of time. It's going to be part-time, full-time, casual, contract, whatever it might be. But pay attention to what those parameters are in the job posting. So in the whole, going back to my notes here, in the whole self-awareness, the next big thing that you're going to want to take a look at is what you bring to the table. And so coming through with the previous experience that you bring, it's not just that you've worked X amount of years at X company or ABC company, and you've got tickets and everything else like that. You can go ahead and say, well, I've worked this many years, but it's not necessarily the years of work that we're looking for. We need to see the expertise. So as a recruiter, I would say, how do I know somebody that's worked at the bank as long as I have, has the same level of expertise as I do? So for example, I used to work at one of the big banks. I was not a teller. I was a recruiter at the very end of it. I did some banking beforehand, but I couldn't tell you what a mutual fund is or anything else like that. So everyone's experience is different for the roles that they've had. And then when you think about your experience, major companies or multinational companies are very few and far between. So typically, if you're working for a multinational company, you're able to transfer between departments in that particular organization. We might not know of those top 500 Fortune companies in your country that you've come from, or understand what level of commitment you had to that role. So when it comes to telling us about the skills, there needs to be a little bit more in-depth understanding. So what were the outcomes? How did you hit those outcomes? Is there anything specific you can tell me? Like, did you lead a team? Were you part of a team of 20? Were you a single person working on projects? Things like that, that you need to understand that is part of your, I call it a suitcase of skills, because it doesn't matter what role you go into, you will always have that experience and that expertise that comes with you. Another thing I like to say is there's a lot of volunteer opportunities or community involvement that we forget to add into our suitcase of skills. I don't want to say resume just yet, because we'll get into the resume pieces of this. And for the record, I do hate resumes because I think they're a very inappropriate tool for gauging who's the best person for the role. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. When it comes to what you bring, if you have a volunteer experience or the community involvement, there's other areas that might not show up for somebody else. So if you're, let's say, an accountant and you teach piano lessons and you get involved with, the Knights of Columbus or something like that, there's different skills that you utilize, like coordination, volunteering for casinos, stuff like that, that necessarily wouldn't come into play with anything else. So don't forget about what else you do. You're not just your, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. What else can you tell them that they won't have to guess that you have that? So I guess if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this is don't let the recruiters or the hiring managers guess what you bring to the table. And we'll come back to that in a little bit here. And again, from the skills that you bring, there's a whole bunch of different assessments that you can do about your strengths. There's a lot of online free tutorials that you can do to find out where you actually function really well, or you've got the ability to take on more. I actually use a very simplistic tool that I call the skills cross, and I'll actually, I'll draw it out for you because it's amazing. So it's literally this. It's a big old plus sign on a sheet of paper. And then in the top corner, it's up here is things that you're good at, and then things that you're bad at down at the bottom. And then the things that you love and the things that you hate. So from here, all you have to do is write down things that you come across on your day-to-day, or you did come across on your day-to-day. And then if you take a look at everything in the top right corner, that's where you want to focus all of your energy on explaining what you're good at, because you don't want to get stuck doing the things that you're bad at or the things that you really don't like doing. So this is a very simple exercise that you can take and do it tonight if you want to understand what you bring to the table when it comes to the joy that you have. Ooh la la, are we getting a whiteboard? Anyway, when it comes down to assessments as well, there's certain professional ones that you can do that'll understand where your soft skills lie as well. And there's a multitude of those as well. I would say be choosy about what kind of assessments you do, because some of them don't have a reliability factor and or have been vetted by science and peer review. So know that a lot of these psychological assessments or personality assessments are derived from psychology or behavioral science. And so there needs to be some sort of peer review or an area that they can prove that there is no bias against male or female, or there's no racial bias as well. So when it comes down to whether or not it's a valid assessment, you need to find that information out beforehand. So do your research and talk to somebody that has been through all of that stuff as well. So when we come down to, okay, so we've talked about being self-aware with your emotions, talking about what you need versus what you want from the job. We've talked about some of the skills that you need to highlight when you come through. And then not only is it the skills that you bring to the table, but the skills that you want. And so what I mean by this is that, you know, if you come in and you're an intermediate professional engineer and you want to get up to that senior level where you are able to train other people and maybe doing some coaching to younger engineers in training or to that effect, what you want to do is to say, okay, where can I go to get that experience so that I'm not just living up to the skills that I bring to the table, but I'm also working as stretching my skill set as well. So I'm adding into the suitcase of skills. And there's a very quick information piece that you can do about this called a skills gap analysis, where if you take a look at a job posting and see the requirements of it, they're going to list things like must have 8 years of experience in, you know, civil engineering. Oh, then you go and say, do I have the 8 years of experience in civil engineering? You go, no, I only have 4. So your gap analysis is that you're missing 4 years of civil engineering experience. And you can do this with any job, like even if you, heaven forbid, you want to go and take that convenience store role, which don't, if you can avoid it at all costs, because that is the, I will get on a soapbox here and say that that is the worst thing that we as Canadian employers have done, is saying that you need Canadian experience, and it doesn't actually benefit anybody to have these professionals that come with all this experience and all this knowledge to go and work in a cash handling job that doesn't add anything to their value. Anyway, I could go, that's a whole nother conversation we could have, and I'd be on a panel for sure with that. But when it comes down to how you're going to stretch those goals, make sure that the stretch is no more than like 30% of what you've got. So like a 50% stretch analysis on there is a little high. If it was 1 or 2 years, that's a good stretch. You can go from there. The other thing to remember is you don't need to check every single requirement box when it says you need to have this, you need to have this, you need to have this, you need to have this. So as long as you're able to identify, 7 out of 13, 8 out of 13, and you're not identifying them directly into your resume, you can put them on your cover letter, you can put them on your resume. As long as you're able to talk to the areas that you don't quite meet all the requirements and what you're looking forward to in learning, then you can go from there. But if you're, 1 or 2 points and you're just trying to get out there, that's a little much. So, so sorry. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit about planning when it comes through. So the first piece is about, the self-awareness, the emotions, what you're looking for, what you bring, what you want. And then the second portion is about gathering the tools that you need and the resources and the allies. So again, it's something that it's going to take a lot of time to do. So when you gather all of your resources ahead of time, you're well prepared. And so some of the tools that I'm talking about is obviously you need to have a cover letter and a resume. And yes, I hate resumes. But when it comes down to the cover letter and the resumes, we need to be able to highlight all of those skills that you've mentioned that you have in order to show that you are a great fit for that role. Because the worst thing you can do in applying for a job is make the recruiter guess or make the hiring manager guess. The more information you can provide about how well you fit the role, the better it is. And there's people that have found ways to cheat that. I'm going to say if you cheat that system, we know, we can find out, and you will be excluded from the recruitment campaign, from the requisition. So don't cheat the system. And people know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to mention it here. So when it comes down to gathering some of the, what's that, Wumi?
Yeah, I was just wondering. So are you talking about the ATS system, like using the right keywords to make sure you get a match? I'm just wondering what that really means, cheating the system.
So cheating the system is where people have copy and pasted the job description inside of the resume that they've basically taken every single word that was in the resume or in the job description, put it in white font and hit it somewhere in the resume. Yeah. And so here's
I've heard people do that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So what people don't understand is the recruitment process is still part of the hiring process. So if you falsify your application, meaning that you've put in the keywords to try and, get past the keyword searches, which some applicant tracking system or ATSs do, but most of the time it's actually the recruiter doing the searches. If we find out that there's no actual words that match, but they're coming through as a match through there, we can say that there's a deception involved. And so if somebody's lying on their resume, what's to stop them from lying about the work that they're doing? It's of poor taste, and it's just not something to do. When it comes to like, oh, well, I need to beat the ATS, we'll talk about that in a little bit because that's part of the application process. But before you start applying, one of the things that you should do is take a look at the types of industries, the types of businesses that you want to work with. So one of the sessions I did at the University of Alberta, we had the international students that were looking to get jobs for between second and third year. And we started talking about where they could go searching for different companies that they wanted to work for. And every single one of the group that I had was talking about, the big 4 accounting firms, the large banks. They were talking about the big engineering, procurement, construction management companies. And I thought, okay, but what about the smaller companies? So specifically in Alberta, I think it's something like 97% of business is fewer than 50 people. So the small businesses have lots of opportunities where you're going to have the ability to learn a lot more from those companies than if you were placed into a role where there's 17 other people in that same particular role doing the same kind of thing. So when it comes down to what you're looking for when it's in the world of work, do you want to have more autonomy? Do you want to be able to do things that aren't necessarily along with the policies and procedures, kind of find your way through? Or do you want to be part of something where the next step is always there? What is your comfort zone? Do you need to have somebody tell you that you're doing a good job, or do you want to be able to, work when you can and tell your boss what the outcomes are. So between the styles of work that you're appreciative of, that's where you should target where you're going to be looking, and then start finding those companies. So LinkedIn is a great resource to start looking for companies like that. Number one, they can always see that there's job postings coming through. I'm just recognizing that there's a lot of people in the chat right now. I might have to come back to these.
Yeah, you can go on for now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for all your questions. We will get to them. When it comes to creating that ideal list of companies, so just like we would create our ideal list of candidates or people that we want to, be doing marketing for or anything like that, when you come up with an ideal list of companies that you want to work for, then your search becomes much more laser focused and not, the broad spectrum approach. So I know that people go onto Indeed and they apply for any, engineering post that comes out there or any software dev post that comes out, which is fine. But if you don't take a targeted approach and you start to get a whole bunch of, callbacks and you forget who you've been reaching out to, that's a problem, because now you're trying to figure out which one was which. So the plan is to make a list of up to 20 companies for the first time. I'm going to say 20 because that's a lot that you'll be doing, because you're not only going to be, are they hiring, what the company is, what size the company is, you're also going to be looking for connections that you can connect to that are outside of the recruitment office, because recruiters do not make the final decision. Yes, we are the first point of contact for a lot of candidates and applicants, but we are not the final decision makers. We're just the go-between. We're the best salespeople in the world because we tell how good a candidate is to the hiring manager. And then we should be following up with communication. So again, we'll come back with that too. But when you make your list of people that you want to get connected to and the companies that you want to get connected to, you can also find out things like what charities do they support? What's their model around culture? Do they support people from different backgrounds? Do they support people from, different areas? Do they talk about growth within the company? Do they talk about things like we treat each other like family? What does that mean to them? Because not all families are fun and pleasant, right? So how many people are on the leadership team? Is there, how large will the company get? Is there opportunity to grow up or grow across in the company? For example, nonprofits don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to moving up the ladder because it's a very flat structure. When we say flat, it means that there's one person in leadership to, maybe 10 people that are right below them in kind of like an organizational chart. But in situations like that, they'll often give project work to some of the people that are looking for more responsibility so that they are still interested in the role after a few years now that they've mastered it. So there's always going to be certain opportunities, but it needs to be that the company or the organization is able to offer them. So when you're making your list, take a look at all these little details. And I don't know how many people love or hate Excel, but Excel is going to be, or a Google Sheet is going to be your best friend in this situation, because you can write down, here's the company, here's when I started researching them, here's the contact people that I want to get connected with. Do they align with the values that I have personally and professionally? Do they align with, the summertime's off, charity causes? When did I talk to them last? Did I submit an application? When did I submit an application? So you have your little tracking sheet as you go, because that's going to save you when you get the out of the blue recruiter call or email saying, hey, we'd really like to have a conversation with you. And you go, oh, great, I know exactly about that company because we align here, 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 and it's all in your spreadsheet for you. So that's going to be a golden tool. And when you, like I said, when you connect with those individuals, make sure that you're not connecting in the recruitment group or the HR group, because sometimes they're seen as gatekeepers. And I know that's a really bad word to use, But recruiters are overwhelmed with a lot of inboxes. And specifically when it comes to recruiters, there's different types of recruiters as well. So the in-house recruiter that you're contacting could be somebody that's working specifically with their trades, which is basically somebody that just picks up the phone and calls anybody that has a safety ticket to get out on site. Or maybe they're working with the professionals. So do a little bit of digging around to see who they are. And if you need a connection, don't be afraid to ask for a connection. So if there's somebody that you are connected with, which, by the way, I'm expecting in connections with everybody. I think there's a few people I already have, so thank you for that. But when it comes down to the connections on LinkedIn, always check and see if you have a connection and ask that person if you can get connected to the next one. Inboxes work well, but if you send an email and the recruiter gets, 400 LinkedIn messages a day, know who your audience is. If they're working for one of the big banks, they're going to have a lot of people emailing them. If they're a small boutique company, probably not. And because we're talking about immigrant techies Alberta, I would say remember the love for your startups and scale-ups. We have a wonderful technology sector here in Alberta. And not that it's a competition between Edmonton and Calgary, but Calgary actually has some unicorns that have come through. Mm-hmm. And unicorn just means that they've reached $1 billion valuation starting from nothing in the past 5 years. So think about all the different companies that have gone from zero to nothing, aka Amazon was in a garage before, he's taking over the world and other things. So don't forget about the little folks as well, because there's movement in there. And it's much better to get Canadian experience through like a technology startup where it actually uses your skill set and that you can provide them value versus working at a job that just provides you a paycheck. So don't sell yourself short, ever, ever, ever. Where else are we going here? All right, the tools. Let's talk about the resumes and the cover letters. So resumes need to be written so that we don't guess. And if that means that your resume doesn't fit on 2 pages, so be it. We want to know what experience you've done and how it's valuable to the work that you're applying for. So do you need to do a new resume every time you apply to a new role? Perhaps, maybe. If your resume is well written for the types of role that you're looking for. So you've already decided that, instead of an intermediate engineering role, you're looking for a senior level role that has some coaching involved with it, then you've got all the pieces that you need to have on your resume, such as you've done previous coaching or peer mentoring, you've been a leader before of a team of, 10 people, you've helped 3 people get their engineering and training designation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anytime that you can add in a value to the work that you've done, whether it be a budget, the number of people, the number of projects, the number of clients, anything like that, it's of value, because a blank statement saying like managing day-to-day operations of, my day-to-day operations are completely different than women's day-to-day operations, especially right now, because we've got such a dichotomy of things going on. So you need to be able to expressly state how you have that experience or how you're working towards that experience. Job titles are something that people look at. So if you had a fancy job title, like, oh gosh, what was one that I saw the other day? Executive ambassador for something. And I'm like, what is an executive ambassador? So it turns out that they were like the, not the supervisor, but like the junior supervisor for a customer service role. And I don't know why companies do that and make up these wonderful names. So if it's something that's a little vague on what the role was, then you can just kind of in brackets put like customer service representative or engineering technologist or anything like that, because again, don't make us assume. As soon as you make somebody assume about your work experience, they're not going to be able to understand how well you fit. And then if you leave out some information on your resume, you're always welcome to put it into the cover letter. Let's say that you had some experience in proctoring exams for engineering. Sorry, I'm focused on engineering just because it's kind of like a holistic one. I'm not saying that this is something that technology folks everywhere. But let's say you were proctoring exams for engineering to get their designations, then this type of situation, you can put it in like, I've also been of value to the association by, proctoring exams. So that shows that you have a higher level of integrity than somebody else, but it's not recent enough to value. Do you need to put the job that you had when you first came out of post-secondary? Probably not, if it's not of value. If it's something that was, if you were one of those lucky few people that came out of university and got that like beautiful job right away that you were happy and wanted to move forward with, I commend you. I don't know a lot of people that did that. Heck, I don't even know a lot of people that went to school for what they're actually in work world for. I went to school for a Bachelor of Science in biochem. Yeah, and now I work in HR. So there's things. We all have our backgrounds. When it comes down to it, I think it's important for you to state to them, again, how you're going to be the best fit. And do it in your own voice if you can, because, and by voice, I mean in writing structure, because that's who you are. If there's tone that can come across and there's formalities, cover letter should be a little bit more formal. Resume should be formal enough that we have all the information that we're looking for. And don't be afraid to put on all of the certifications that you've received, which is going to be there. And this is kind of important. So Ruben, just give me 1 second. I'm seeing this one here. Maybe I'll go back a little bit. Okay, there's a couple here. Okay, I often get email from recruiters that you don't have experience in this relevant role. How would I get if I'm not given a chance in Canadian industry? Well, that's what we're going to try and solve today. So we're trying to make it so that you have strong enough information, Ruben, to be focusing in on everything that they're looking for and nothing that they're not. So again, targeted towards a job description. If they use terms like client, then you use terms like client. Whereas you're not going to be changing your entire resume around or CV around. I would also say that with the experience that you have, you can also say like, I don't presently have Canadian experience in this. However, this is what I'm looking for. If you get an opportunity to volunteer, it's better than nothing. And it's also better than the what do they call them? Under-skilled roles, or roles where you're in that you're not utilizing your skill set or your work experience. So we'll touch on a couple other things that we can work on that as a group as well, how we can adjust things. And Olatunde, I think we covered off the what? Okay.
Yeah, that was when you were talking about not cheating on the application.
Yeah, don't cheat. Don't cheat. How to get a job, even if entry-level position, they ask for 2 to 3 years experience. A lot of times the job descriptions, when they put 2 to 3 years experience, they're just trying to get somebody that isn't fresh into the world of work. And I mean somebody that comes straight from high school into whatever role they're going, or straight from, not ever having a job to finally getting a job and they don't know what to do. So I think a lot of things that we have when we bring to the table, kind of in like a career relaunching aspect, is we already have that suitcase of skills. We understand how it works on a team dynamic for business. We understand project management. We understand customer service, because every role or every company that you work for has some sort of customer. So I think our advantage when we come into these opportunities is we can say that we still have, 2 to 3 years of experience in this, this, and this. And then when they say, if it's Canadian experience, you can always ask them, why do you need Canadian experience? And so here's the kicker. Apart from legal aspects and or legislation. So legislation, you need to understand the legislation from employment standards, from labor, from accounting, taxation purposes, things like that. You also do need to be able to have the ability to work for any employer in Canada. The reason behind that is that a lot of small businesses or larger businesses, even today, do not have the ability or the resources to do what's called a labor market information assessment, or LMIA, to bring on foreign workforce. There is some applications that they're doing in Alberta that will fast track some technology roles, which is great. We haven't seen that come to fruition just yet, I don't think. But that's something that's going to come down the pike pretty soon. But then those roles are going to be in the higher seniority level in technology roles. So smaller businesses cannot afford to do that type of work, to bring on somebody that isn't able to work for any employer in Canada. Permanent residency, totally okay. That's, everybody can work as a PR. And then there's some companies that will work with you to help you get to that level. However, most companies don't have that ability financially, time-wise. They're just too stretched. So that's one thing to keep ahead of. But yeah, if they do ask for Canadian experience, ask them why it's important to the role. And again, like I said, barring a few things, like anatomy is anatomy is anatomy. It's not going to change from South America to North America. It's the Americas, hell, like it's there. Engineering has the same principles all the way through. It's physics, it's science, there's nothing that changes. It's mathematics. When it comes down to it, there's
the problem with
legislation.
that, though, is you don't even get to the interview stage because of that. So where do you get a chance to ask questions if the lack of Canadian experience has already excluded you from the process?
So that's when you bring into play your planning, where you go, holy shoot, we're at 45. Okay, where you go and follow up with them. So once you do your application on your Excel spreadsheet application, and then followed up by 3 days later, you're going to say, send an email to the connection that you've made. Hey, I've applied for this role. I'm just wondering if they could reach out, like, I'd love to hear some feedback about my application. If they say that you don't have the Canadian experience, again, you can question them and say, is this a bona fide occupational requirement? Which is a legal term. Do they have the ability to say that you absolutely need to have Canadian work experience to do the role? Which in a lot of cases, again, no, you don't need to have that. If they're excluding you based on that, it could be seen as something discriminatory. So if you follow up, chances are you'll get some sort of information. If you get that information, pull on that string a little bit and say, like, I really want to work for your company. What should I do? You know, or this role is very fitting to the skills I bring to the table and where I want to get to. How would I make this work? Do you have an internship or something like that? But again, that's diminishing the value that you bring to the table, right? So I have worked with some employers that I've guarded against or guided against saying that they need a Canadian experience, and other ones that I've worked with that have a legal requirement that it needs to be Canadian taxation, right? So as long as it's a bona fide occupational requirement that they do need to have Canadian experience, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do with that. But it never hurts to ask why. Honestly, the people I remember in recruitment campaigns are the ones that followed up. I don't remember every single resume. It's the people that follow up. So like I said, on that Excel spreadsheet, make sure the last column is follow up. Follow up with the recruiter at that point, or the hiring manager, or your connection that you have there, whatever it may be. Okay, so you've got your job description that's saying, you know, X, Y, Z. Rupam, I'll come back to that in a second, okay? I see your question there. So you've got your job description, you've seen your resume, you've changed small things, not major things. So they're looking for leadership, you've added in your leadership pieces. They're using the word client, you use the word client instead of customer. They're saying, you know, you need to have professional engineering, you add in that you're working towards 6 years of engineering and training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got your resume touched up, your cover letter identifies or addresses anything that might seem as a gap of employment. You know, when you've made the move, was there any, you know, a month or two off? Like, explain those gaps in employment just so that they don't make assumptions. Again, no assumptions. And then what you're going to do with that job description, once you've gone through it all, you're going to take a look at the requirements and see how they're going to ask questions. So 3 things that a job description should have are responsibilities, requirements, and rewards. So you're going to look at the responsibilities and the requirements, and you're going to come up with some questions that if you were the hiring manager, you would ask yourself. So this is how you can prep for the interview itself. So again, requirements would be, enter data into project management tool. Okay, what project management tools have you used in the past? Needs to be covering off SQL database, Azure consumption, understand, migration, Question would be, what technology have you used in the past? What are you comfortable with? What is your coding language that you prefer? So you can take the job description and basically flip it around into asking questions. So it's kind of like the Jeopardy maneuver where you kind of get the answers before you get the question or you ask the question. So you're going to see what the answers are going to be, how you provide it based on the questions that they're going to ask, rather than saying like, you need this, that's the question. How do you have this? So how do you have this requirement? How are you going to achieve this responsibility? And then think of it in 2 different ways for questions being asked, being like, can you do the job? So do you have that kind of experience? Do you have the education? Do you have the expertise? And then will you do the job? So those will you do the job questions are going to be focused on tell me about a time when. So how did you solve a problem? How did you resolve a fight? How did you, delight somebody beyond their expectations? How did you lead a team through a difficult time? All of those things. So think about those questions when it comes down to what a day in the life of that world of work would look like. And so that's how you can basically prepare yourself with those questions that you have. Does that make sense for the flipping the questions around? Yeah. I've got like 4 people on camera, so. Yes, no?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Going down into it. Okay, so then last thing that I have on here is resources, and it's squashed in. So I want to be respectful of time. I'm just going to be like really quickly. So when it comes down to your job search, the biggest tool that you can have, or the biggest resource that you can have, is your network. So these types of events where you get to meet with other people, where you get to either in person or over video, as the world has evolved, remotely network with other people is a great way to get your next role. Specifically because there's going to be a lot of opportunities that may not present themselves just because there's algorithms within LinkedIn and everything else like that. A great opportunity on a Tuesday becomes page 6 on a Wednesday morning. So if you're going on Indeed or Google or ZipRecruiter or anything like that, a great opportunity, unless you go back a little bit, it's past. So timing has to do with that a little bit as well. I'm going to put a job board in the chat that is from an Albertan company called Job Offer. And what they do is their tagline is the last job board you'll ever use as an employee, as a candidate. So you put your application in there, and as jobs come through, they'll actually match you against it, which is really cool tech. And then when you have the opportunity, you can either say yes or no to the match if you'd be interested. So there's lots of great resources that way. Associations like, Immigrant ITA, great. I mean, there's so many good opportunities that come through here. Platform Calgary, Edmonton Unlimited. Those are 2 of the startup hubs in and around Alberta. We also have ALIS, which is the Alberta Learning Information System about going forward with jobs. I think Nancy put that in the chat a little bit earlier. So there's assessments, there's occupational information, there's wage information, so we don't short sell ourselves on this. And then basically, if you need to reach out, reach out. So myself as a recruiter, technically I'm called a corporate recruiter or an agency recruiter. So I work in an agency that helps companies hire. So I don't work with the candidates, I work with the corporations, with the organizations. like Robert Half or those like large companies that are always placing people. Those are the recruiters that work specifically with the candidates at no cost to you to find a placement. And there's always going to be IT and there's always going to be software development and technology in there. So those are great people to get connected with as well. And then the corporate recruiters that are sitting on the inside, those are the ones that they're order takers. They just get a whole bunch of information coming to them to find. So they're not specifically looking for talent, they're just kind of screening the talent. So be aware of the different types of recruiters and connect with the ones that are going to serve you rather than serve the company. That being said, I'm all about helping people get jobs. I will always share and like jobs that are posted on LinkedIn. So you can follow me and I'll probably have some opportunities that might not be on your algorithm. But yeah, so let's get into a couple of the questions here. I don't know, like, can we go a little bit longer, Wumi, if we need to?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone that can stay, can stay.
Cool. Okie dokie. So Ruben had the last one.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question. So
yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about negotiating, not selling yourself short. In some cases, the jobs they're under a unionized environment. So there's really a cap. You can't bargain your way out of that cap. So what other things can you negotiate if you can't move the pay?
If you can't move the pay. So union negotiation is very difficult because there's unions that they pay people to negotiate on behalf of the employees. So great question. The salary range is always going to be posted in there. If you find that you're on the very top end of the salary band for a union job, you might want to be looking at the job that's the next level up. Just because it'll be something that's more in the responsibility wheelhouse that you're used to, number one. And number two, there would be no room to grow from a salary compensation perspective. So when it comes to negotiation, you can negotiate things like how many weeks of vacation you get, or is there, do I have to work a full 40, or could I do a little bit less hours for this role? So it's time versus money, right? So what are you able to get for that chunk of money that you don't have to put all of your time in? So vacation is one of them, days off is another, earned days off is another. But typically speaking, unions already have that pretty like locked down. Never hurts to try. What's the worst they can say? No.
Right.
All right. Okay. So let's see. If we're applying for tech roles, do we need to put work experience, which is non-relevant, like gas bar clerk? What if it's the only Canadian experience I have? Okay, I would put that in there, but I would make it as not your prominent work experience. So a lot of us tend to do a chronological type of a resume. So the most recent work experience is, reverse chronological. The most recent work experience is the first thing that we put up. And so it's going to show that you're gas clerk. And like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the thing that like irritates me to no end. So you probably have experience someplace else that is more suitable for that role. Put that ahead. Or you can do what's called a hybrid type role. So rather than putting reverse chronological, you could put in, here's some of my attributes, some of my traits. So for me, because I went from banking or restaurant hospitality to banking to engineering to entrepreneurship, I basically have a skills-based resume. So I talk about my leadership, I talk about recruitment, I talked about, my HR management, and all of these different things that highlight who I was. But like the places I worked were Swiss Chalet and RBC and, an engineering firm nobody's ever heard of. So it doesn't mean that I don't have the experience. It's just, it's organized in a different way to show the experience is different. And so if you have that kind of on your front page as your, I call it the Coachella poster, where, here's the headliners, like Beyonce's coming, but then also we have like the Talking Heads and like, oh yeah, and Weezer is down here. And so like the headliner comes first. I have the experience and here's where I got the experience. And oh, by the way, I also have Canadian experience. It's just not something that you really can align with. So a functional skills-based resume or a functional resume might be the best way to go in this situation. And you can search that up. Also be careful on a lot of the templates that are coming off of Canva and other places, because if you start to fill in those resumes, they don't work well, they don't merge well into some of the online application portals, the applicant tracking systems. So pictures on resumes, yeah.
I was gonna say that too, that even when you apply on company portals, you know how some company, you have to fill in everything, they already have templates on their website. They want it to be chronological. Like it's already designed that way. So sometimes you don't really have a way around that. And I think the cover letter might be a place to showcase what you want to be at the forefront in that case. If
Absolutely.
you're not able to move around the dates on the resume itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And you're right, there are some places that are, okay, tell me about your experience. Tell me about your education. Okay, now upload your resume that you just told me all this information from. Okay, thank you, City of Calgary. Not that I'm mentioning anybody in particular.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah, sure.
So thanks for answering like about the functional resume. As Umi said, like I have like already prepared one functional resume where I have like listed down my skills and achievements, and the company names I have just listed at the end. Like I have worked in so and so company. So does having a functional resume like affect the ATS system? Like or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter, no. So as long as the words are in there, so an applicant tracking system is just a fancy way for us to say, this is where we collect all of the resumes, all of the applications that come through. Typically, you will have some sort of login for whatever it is. You'll be able to put in information about yourself, and you'll be able to upload a resume and a cover letter. So what happens when that kind of goes through the pipeline here, and I will get to your question, Alex, I can see it there, so I haven't forgotten. When it goes through all of the little buckets, so if you start here from application and then it goes into an inbox, so the recruiter takes a look at it and says, yes, they hit these types of qualifications that we're looking for, or no, it doesn't hit the qualifications. And then they'll either move them through or they will decline. And so if there's an immediate decline, what happens is you get an automated message. So it's not an actual robot or a spam bot. It is somebody moving your application through the process. And there's an automatic like chat function. They'll say, thank you so much for your application. At this time, you have not been selected. And that's an easy way for them to say, okay, now we're moving ahead with some of the people that we're looking for. The applicant tracking system is just a basic catch-all for everything. The people that are doing the keyword searches are not robots or not spam bots, not parsing robots. It's actual human beings. So we're doing Boolean searches for, customer service and cash handling, or engineering and environmental, things like that we can put together to make these searches a little bit easier on ourselves. So we go from having 600 applications down to 60, and then we go from there. From that perspective, a lot of people think that the bots are automatically declining them, and that's not true. There's no applicant tracking system that actually automatically declines unless it has a pass-fail. And the only pass-fail that people should be having is, are you legally required to work for any employer in Canada? That is it. So if you answer no to that, that will be the pass-fail that a lot of places will decline for. Yeah.
And as you say, like mention your skills like project management, like you are entrepreneur and then human resource. So do we need to explain them like as an achievement? Like many people say, write them as a star answer, like you achieved this much result with the numbers, or we just write the duties as the present tense in the job description.
Tell me numbers. Tell me how good you were. Tell me how amazing you were able to manage that team. Tell me how great you were able to come in under budget. Tell me how many bonuses you got or whatever it was. Because if I just see like managed team of 5, cool. Okay. I know some really awful managers that managed a team of 5. Tell me how good your team was. Managed a high performing team that ranked first in sales division, or managed high performing team that consistently came, 80% under budget and 80% under time for project management. Things like that. We want to know the superstar you are. And it's weird to put that into words, like how amazing you are, because we're human beings tend to undersell themselves quite frequently. But this is the one point that you should not undersell yourself ever.
Thanks,
Got it?
Ali.
My pleasure. Okay,
And
Alex.
something to note on that same point is, even when you do have your job, when you do get the job, or if you're on the job right now, then it's important to start taking note of your successes, because we naturally don't think about them until you're job searching. So keeping a journal of sorts of what you're accomplishing on your job every day might be a good way to have all of that accessible. This is a note I'm taking for myself.
But in this situation, absolutely. And that's why I say it's one of the first things you do is kind of build that skills inventory. Like, what do you bring to the table? And if you can get very specific on what you brought to the table, like in 2011, I won the Diversity and Inclusion Award through RBC for Western Canada because I was able to get, my 75 teammates spoke 23 different languages. Like that kind of thing. Put it down there because that's important. And then again, it's the humble brag. You get to, like, nobody knows how good you are until you tell them, right? Just pretend it's like TikTok. You need to tell everybody how amazing you are at everything you do. It's TikTok or something. I think that's what the kids are calling it. Okay, Alex, how do we get feedback if no one ever replies, emails, follows ups to avoid any legal action against? Ooh, okay. I hate this question because you're right. A lot of people will avoid following up due to they don't want to give you the hard truth. In any case, if it's something that there's a saying called choose the hill to die on. If this is a job that you're really, really focused on and you really want to get there, but they're not giving you the time of day, what is the output of your energy and time versus the results that you're getting? So if you keep following up with one company and they're not giving you anything, it's time to move on. If you feel that you have grounds for discrimination, you can make a human rights complaint for recruitment. It is in the law. However, human rights complaints since the pandemic are now at, I think, a 5.5-year wait to go through the system. So again, time versus energy versus the results that you're trying to get. I think when it comes down to this type of thing, the social justice does a little bit more than the actual justice. So when we see that there's this is why it's very important at the beginning to like take a look and see what their policies are, their culture is. Do they say things like they are inclusive and they focus on belonging versus, we're just diversity experts over here. Well, that's great, but everybody on your leadership team is white. Like there's not a single female and there's not a single person of color. So you don't have diversity at all. I think it's important to understand that how they interpret certain things is how it's going to come across during the whole application process. So number one, please do not ever change your name to an anglicized name. Your parents gave you that name on purpose, and I'll be damned if I do mispronounce your name. I will ask how to say it correctly if I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm not going to disrespect your parents. That's just me. I think unfortunately, there's a lot of talk about how people have whitened their resumes to get past the first process. And that's absolutely appalling. And I think that's where the recruitment process does need to change. That being said, if a company is truly speaking its values and living its values, they will do things to find out, how do I say your name? I want to get this right. Or, accommodation. If you're somebody that is hard of hearing, do you have a telephonic interview or do you have an in-person interview? Do you have an interpreter? There's many different ways that people can say that they have an inclusive work environment and a belonging environment. Be careful around the diversity thing, because a lot of people just put diversity as we have like 2 women and everybody else is male, like we fit our quota, yay. So again, I think it's important to understand, what energy and effort you put into the process at the beginning is what the results are you're going to get out at the end. If you're just doing that, like, broad spectrum kind of attack every role that looks like something that you've been in, you might come across these kind of situations more frequently, Alex, if you don't get the feedback. However, if you're very targeted and you're informed and you understand how they operate, then if this gets to the point where you're not getting follow-ups, you go up the chain if you can. Hi, I applied and I'm not getting any response. I'd like to know why I didn't meet the qualifications. Could somebody please get back to me? And then if they say, well, you know, there is no Canadian experience, can you tell me if that's a bona fide occupational requirement?
I mean, they hardly ever say that in writing.
No, they don't. They don't.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Abby Oden, let's see. I recently interviewed with an oil and gas multinational in Canada. I got to the final stage and also believed I did well at the interview. Unfortunately, got an email that was not selected. Very painful. I can appreciate that. 2 weeks after, they brought out the same advert for the role. I wrote the recruiter that sent me the interview request to request feedback about my former application and never got feedback. Ooh, you get sticky. I would start saying, listen, I see that this role is out again. Is this a new position, or can you tell me what is missing from my application so I can work on that for future? Again, energy in versus output. Do you believe that they're going to come back to you? And if this wasn't, was it a department? Was it a different area? Was it a different region? There's lots of information here that you can kind of go around. Same role. Oof. Yeah, I would be following up and then see if you've got connections in there. Yeah, that's shady. That's really shady, especially because you've asked for the feedback.
I mean, is there a regulation that makes employers have to provide feedback?
No, so there's no legal requirement, right? So yeah, there's no legal requirement for employers having to provide feedback. So that's the first piece that you should understand. Secondly, if they do provide feedback, they can be guarded in how they say it. So, you know, it just wasn't the right fit, or we changed what the outcomes are going to be, or something like that. They can be very non-specific. The good ones will always follow up with you and communicate with you. They could say that maybe it went to an internal and then the internal came back and we have to start the process again due to our organization or union, whatever. But if people don't talk to you, that's a very poor sign. I would say, is it worth the effort to go back into this particular role, or should you want to go up the chain of command to see if you can find another way to get interviewed? Again, I remember the ones that have followed up with me. The ones that followed up ad nauseum, like so much, were the ones that started to get rather annoying. So, and I mean, I don't know anything about the role. I don't know anything about your abilities. So Abiodun, it could be many different things, but based on the information. Oh, email. That's very
shady. On the flip side, I've heard recruiters that provided feedback and got burned.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard someone that actually shared his painful experience. I think he had gone into so much specifics, and the candidate felt slighted. That how can you say I'm not good enough? How can you say I didn't come across as I could meet this? And so it became something that the recruiter was scolded for by his own employer. That you did not need to have provided that much detail. See what you got us into.
So and that's the other thing too. So when this is why I say, like, be self-aware when you start the process.
Exactly.
And the confidence, like getting something like that, painful is just, I don't think that's a strong enough word for what you've gone through, truthfully. So I can respect the emotion that comes from that, and like grieving the loss of a job that you could have had. That's very important. And like just having your confidence killed in an application like that completely changes the whole dynamic of your career search or your job search. So I would be respectful of this time and just kind of like, what can you learn from this? How do you move forward? And what could you do differently? And knowing that you're probably talking to a brick wall of a recruitment team because they're not going to give you anything. It's more on you on how to take this away and make it, I don't want to say a positive experience, but a learning experience from what you're going through. And again, I'm so sorry. One of the things that a good recruiter does is follow up. That's just it.
And so,
anyway.
something, another trend that I think has been happening after COVID is a company will post the job and say it's remote. Then people will apply from all over. But then if there is a candidate that lives in the city where they prefer to have the role, then they deflect to that. They'll choose the person that lives in that city, even though they had advertised the role as remote. So a lot of things happen on the back end sometimes that's really not about you and your skills at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I wanted to mention is it's actually legislation now in a couple of states, which usually means that in like 3 or 4 years, we'll see it in Canada. There is a requirement to post the job salary, and there's quite a heavy fine if they don't. So I think it's Colorado, New York State, and I think California are the 3 right now. And yeah, so you have to put the salary range. And I saw one salary range that was like 0 to 2 million, which don't apply for that one ever. Or just be like, hey, can you tell me how, as an administrative assistant, I can get that $2 million salary?
That's malicious compliance.
Right? Exactly. Malicious compliance. However, the governments can charge them $250,000 per incident. So if they start doing that all the time, there goes your $2 million salary. But yeah, it's unfortunately, there are good people be doing that malicious compliance, but I think it's going to be something that makes it easier for people to apply for jobs that are actually of value to them.
Right.
And not make us underemployed. There you go. That's a great attitude, Abiodun, where you say they've lost out on me. I'm amazing. Absolutely. Any other questions? Anybody want to pop in or say anything? Or you can always, like, I've got some time this week. You are always welcome to send me a message on LinkedIn. If you connect with me, I will accept every single friend request, whatever we call it, connection on LinkedIn. Know this, though, that what you are doing is incredible. And again, I've only ever done it nationally. I've not done it internationally. I could only imagine what it would look like to do it in a new area with a new system. So I hope this was of a little bit of value. Eliza,
Alyssa, yeah, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, sorry. I don't know if we still have time, but I just wanted to ask quickly for at what point do you think for someone who is trying to switch from a totally different career path, like trying to transition, at what point do you think at what point would I say I'm ready and we'll start applying for jobs? Because like I think you mentioned about when someone was asking about the question of entry level, asking for experience and all that. And of course, you can't tell lies in your resume. What's that stage where you know that you're ready for this and then you can start applying for a job? And then where do you think one can actually get like junior position or training position? Because doesn't seem to be available anymore, or maybe I'm not looking in the right direction, but that's my question.
Okay, so if I understand your question, it's about when do you move past the stages of, am I ready to do this? Am I beginning to get my plan? And then where are these open positions in the junior roles? Is that correct?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Or like internship, you know.
Sure. Okay, great question. So we'll tackle the first part first. When you're ready to move on is when you feel that you are confident enough. So it's kind of the difference between, waking up on the right side of the bed kind of thing, where you're in a great mood and you're ready to hit the ground running. That's kind of the attitude that you need to take on when it comes to this job search. So doing the self-assessments, being self-aware, getting all of that information gathering, that's something that you can continue to do. Like when we were saying, just keep a journal of some of the targeted approaches that you're taking to the world of work that you're in right now. But when you're ready to start looking, it's where there is something that is driving you forward. So you want something better for yourself. You want the opportunity, or it could be the opportunity is presenting itself to you as well. So that kind of ties into the second part, where are the jobs? So it depends, and that is such an HR answer, and I'm so sorry. It depends on where you're looking. So if you're making that list of, you know, the 20 companies that you're looking for, some of the companies will be those larger ones that will always have their job postings on their careers webpage. You can sign up for email notifications on specific roles that you're looking for. But for the smaller companies, they're going to be the ones that are hitting Indeed or hitting joboffer.com. I'm going to put that in there. Just a second, I got to get it. Make sure it's the correct language there. With the other areas, like Platform Calgary will post jobs for startups that are there. Edmonton Unlimited posts jobs for startups in Edmonton. There's different Slack channels that you can join. I think there's, gosh, I don't know if she's still active, but she had a Slack channel of like something like 10,000 software developers or engineers. Lumi, what was her name? We did a session with her before. I'm forgetting it.
What
my
was the
gosh.
session about?
It was about getting connected for, oh my goodness, getting connected when you're an immigrant in Alberta. So you were brought up and she was brought up, and I can't remember the name of it. And I'm gonna have to post it on LinkedIn tomorrow. I so apologize for everybody. Okay, it's joboffer.com. So let me just grab this. Anyway, so there's, you know, Slack channels are kind of like the most scrappiest way to get connected with the junior roles. I know recently there's a Slack channel in Edmonton that is the YEG startup scene or something like that. They had to change the name of it. That being said, it has job postings every day. Hey, we're looking for 2 junior developers. We're looking for some people to come join our team. Take a look at those opportunities that come out around January. January usually has the opportunities for co-ops or interns for people that are, you know, coming out of college or coming out of programs. So those are going to be entry-level positions as well, because they'll usually take about 4 months to fill for grant purposes. But yeah, I think it's really, when you come down to that targeted approach, find out where they are. So for example, when I got connected with the engineering firm, I didn't have any engineering contacts whatsoever. So I started to connect within Eventbrite. So I started looking at some of the events that were happening and going to like the APEGA, which is the professional engineering group. Any event that they had, there was YEG, Young Professionals in Energies, YEG, YPE. So going to those events as well. So just getting connected within the network, and the network is really going to be your net worth when it comes to the job search. So kind of finding out, Nancy, what you got?
Yeah, so something to add to that. If you're doing a career pivot, you're trying to transition from one thing to the other, you do have some transferable skills already, and you must have gone through some training, some course to certify you in this new career path. So don't wait until you feel like you're ready, because you need to test the market. You need to test what the kind of feedback you get, what the experience is like. You need to go through some interviews that may not work out, but then you learn from that process and know where the gaps still are. So yeah, so just sometimes you just test it, not because you're confident you'll get it, but because you know that then you understand more what the gap still is.
Awesome. Nancy, do you want to say something before?
Yeah, for those that didn't hear my introduction when we first started, hi, my name is Nancy Wilson, and I actually have the pleasure of working with Allie and her organizations on a few different projects and stuff. But one of the things that I wanted to tell all you folks here is another client that I work with and do all of the training and facilitation for is a company called BGS Career Adventures. And I'm going to put that in the link right there into down there for everyone in the chat. One of the things that we do along with career and employment counseling, coaching, career connects with employers that are actually looking for employees. BGS has been in business for over 25 years and is supported by the Alberta government, where we look to help individuals, whomever they are, to connect to employment. And one of the services that we provide is workshops. They are free to the public. And I facilitate a lot of them, so maybe I'd see some of you if you folks were on there. But some of the subjects that we do are exactly what Allie's been talking to you about. And so if you want to go into the website under the workshop section, you'll see a variety of workshop sessions. That's a tongue twister. We put the calendar out every month. So we're talking about how to write a resume. So there a resume and cover letter workshop, interview techniques, career planning, work search strategies. So we're just talking about where to look for work under that untapped market or unseen market, intro to computers, intro to finance, anything that you might need to help you in your job search and careers. So feel free, I just put that site there. Like as I said, I work with Allie. I have the pleasure working with her, and I also facilitate those. So maybe I'll see you around in those, but the subjects are very useful as I hear what Allie is chatting with you today. So again, it's free. You can do them in person or you can do them right on Zoom. So just go ahead and take a look at what some of those might be of service for you. So maybe we'll see you there.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That's so helpful.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, James, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to chip in something based on what you're saying. Everything is like amazing, but something I just want to push in again was the place of volunteering. So volunteering, it could be in any regard or any form, but the beautiful thing about volunteering is the fact that to an extent you already know the outcome. It's usually a yes. So it's like knowing the outcome of something before you step into it. So this gives you the confidence to approach people. You're able to put yourself in the right place to approach people. You're going to be able to do like improv discussions, pretty much interviews already, because you know what you're going to get at the end of the day. If they say no, this is their loss, right? If they say yes, then it's your own gain. And this gives you an opportunity to get into the system. You meet people, you use your skills that you already have to showcase yourself. Now, the beauty is that it's a journey, right? You're doing it to get to an expected goal. Maybe it's not even with that company. Maybe it's not even with that particular field or anything. But the fact is, these little wins, this little confidence boost that you're going to get along the way will push you till you finally get to that right position. So as you're going through this, you're meeting people, you're volunteering with someone, there's going to be back and forth, you're building your communication skills because you're doing tasks, you're delivering at a particular time. That way you're owning these skills, you're all getting responsibilities. There's some unconscious build up of skills that you're going to get along the way. It might not be for extended period of time, but the beautiful thing is that it helps you build this character so that when you now get to actually using it for getting a job, you already have all these little nuanced skills that are already part of you. And when the job comes, it's just a natural flow. It's something that actually worked for me well. And I always like pointing out, I volunteered for immigrant techies. And when I got my interview opportunity, the things that I was already doing on a daily basis, like interfacing with Wumi, taking on tasks, trying to deliver it on time. When I got to my interview, I was trying to just go through these things. They were already second nature. I could just quickly step up and pick up a conversation with anybody on LinkedIn and send the formal messages because I already did this already with people that I was doing. And the beautiful thing about volunteering is the fact that it's free, right? And there's no pressure at all. Anything you give to the system is beneficial to the system and yourself. And to an extent, there's no wrong answer or anything. The only thing you can do is to sharpen your skills and get better. So on that note, I'm also telling everybody out there, volunteer. Immigrant Tech is also looking for volunteers. So if you can, please volunteer for Immigrant Tech. It blessed me. And I'm currently in Canada right now. I got a job before I landed. And these little things were the things that really, really, really helped me. Plus, it's also good in your spirit, right? So yeah, I think that should be said.
100%. Nice little promo at the end there. No, that was
Nice
brilliant.
plug.
Absolutely brilliant. It was a great plug. I think, yeah, absolutely. 100%. Everything you're saying, there's what's it called? YEG Startup Awards that they ask for volunteers all the time, and they'll get like something like close to 30 volunteers for an opportunity that's a one-night thing, but they get to work with people in the community that are decision makers in the community and the ecosystem. And so those opportunities come few and far between. So why not get the opportunity to meet people, volunteer your time, show how amazing you are in person, and get that kind of like the boost, that little boost that you're talking about. That's great.
And then attending events like this has that same effect, because when you attend and you participate, there's a point where you get used to talking about yourself, that when it becomes an interview, it's not different anymore, because you're now comfortable talking about your skills, what you're looking for, what you're giving, what you're offering, because you've been doing that in informal circumstances. So when you're having an interview, then your brain recognizes that, oh, this is just another human being. You're just going to have another chat like you've done several times. So
exactly. I was going to say, if you're a nervous little Nelly like I am, if you're doing a video interview, get yourself a like a stick chair, not a wheelie chair, because I would have been doing this the entire time that we were talking. So I pulled over a chair that doesn't have wheels on it, so I'm very engaged. That's my own little tip. No, this is great. Anything else? Have we covered off everything that we really needed to cover off? I mean, I could go on forever on this.
Wow, it's 7:30.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll be respectful of time.
Yeah, I'm so happy you spent more time than planned. Nancy, thank you for staying the whole time as well. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
I do hope that everybody has connected with me. First name, last name is there, but I'll put my...
Yeah, if you could just drop your profile in there.
For sure. I just need to...
I mean, if I can summarize everything you said in one sentence, is that it is a process, and you can't wing it. So a plan has to go into it. What are you looking for? What are you not looking for? And then follow through.
Yeah, it's very important. It's just as important what you're not looking for is what you are looking for.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you for coming. And Allie has dropped her profile in the chat, so please connect to Allie. Mine is there as well. I also shared the membership form for Immigrant Techies Alberta. If you want to be a member, if you want to be notified when we have events, please fill that form. Yeah. Thank you so much. Glad that you made it out tonight.